Welcome, everyone. This is Dan Henn, CPA, CTR, coming to you with another episode of the Practitioner's Edge from the FICPA Small Firm Suite. And today we have another special guest here. We have Laurence Whittam with Whitman Advisory. And we're going to have a great discussion today to talk about more about the types of services that his firm provides to CPA practitioners. I think it's actually, we had a brief discussion before we started recording today, and I think it'll be very helpful. A lot of the things that he's going to talk about that their firm provides is a service that, because this is specifically for CPAs, I think it will be very important for you guys to hear. So with that, let's go ahead and get into it then. So Laurence, in 60 seconds or less, tell us a little bit about yourself. What's your position with Whitman?
Yes, so Laurence Whittam. So I'm not the owner of Whitman as a group, right? Phil Whitman is, and we're not related. It just happens to be very close last names. But we are a consulting group. We've worked with CPA firms for the past 20 plus years. Personally, I run our global strategy side of the business, where I personally help firms of all sizes if they're looking at any type of remote staffing, whether that's domestically here in the US, whether that's offshore in India, in the Philippines, in South America. I help educate on all the options available to them. I've done due diligence on 150 plus outsourcing firms of different models, different ways that they're doing it. But then I really come into the firm and help them refine their process, get them prepared in order to do so, and make sure they're having a much more successful time than they've had previously, right? A lot of people really struggle with it. Could be communication problems, could be other aspects. So that's where it's like, it's actually things we need to change ourselves in order to do it better. So this is where I don't provide the staff. I'm completely independent to that. And I will help find and help you work with the right provider in order to do it properly internally and make sure you have a good experience doing it.
And then obviously, since you're dealing with the global aspect, help them with whatever rules and laws that they need to deal with here based in the US.
Correct. Like all the regulations, like the tax 7216 is
Correct.
like the biggest one, right?
Right.
So making sure they have the right documentation for that, making sure that they're rolling it out in the best way possible to get the highest sign rate, but also so that all their team members are educated on it so that they can answer the client's questions, right? Should the clients reach out to them? Because that's generally more of the concern than actually rolling out just the initial sort of engagement letter with the language in it.
Okay. So then how would you explain to a CPA? So you're at a networking event and you're sitting there talking to a CPA, and obviously you have your specialty, and Whitman Advisory does a lot more than just what you specialize in. So how would you describe to them in a 30, 60-second kind of elevator speech in terms of what you guys do and provide?
So, and I mean, the big thing is we really have a C-suite for CPA firms, right? We have experts that have been C-suite positions within some of the largest firms in the nation, right? Dave Kell, COO of Citrin Cooperman, Jason McKeever, CLO of Eisner Amber. We have a CMO. We have all these factors that whether you're a firm looking to do an M&A transaction now or in the future, whether you're a firm looking to stay independent and grow, we are able to actually help you fractionally to make sure we handle all the practice management elements that a firm needs to have in place. Make sure you're driving it forward, going across all goals and responsibilities. And we're implementers, right? We're not the consultants that will we're not like a coach. We can be to some extent, but we like to get our hands dirty. We've all been in operating positions. So we really help the firm actually go and do, and we become a resource and an advisor to all size firms.
Okay. So you've thrown out a few different acronyms. Just want to kind of clarify. So M&A, mergers and acquisitions, right? So
Yeah,
so if you
correct.
talk to a firm, obviously me as a CPA, you're going to talk to me if I'm looking at trying to have an exit plan. That exit plan could be either A, me acquiring another firm, or me getting acquired by another firm. So your advisory would be helping do that kind of
Helping look at helping from an M&A perspective, look at all the options, right? Whether that's private equity have come into the picture, right? We've got wealth management groups, we've got other local firms, and it's really understanding like what's your exit plan, right? Do you have a succession plan? What's the best fit for you? And then how do we drive up your EBITDA in order to have the best exit possible as well,
Okay.
right? Making sure that it's most valuable to whatever your goals are.
Right. Okay. So that's great. Then let's get into the next question here. So as best as you know and understand, what's the origin story of Whitman Advisory in terms of the services that you guys offer? The question that I ask is basically who got bit by the radioactive spider, got hit by the gamma rays and turned into the Hulk, that why this got started.
So I'll speak more generally to like my global strategy,
Okay.
right? And the big reason was I built a BPO, quite a successful one that's within this accounting space. And what I found that there was nobody actually, everybody was struggling about how to outsource. Like, how do I really actually leverage outsourcing? How do I do this properly? There was vendors knocking at the door every single day, whether it was on LinkedIn or by email saying, we can provide you talent, we can provide you staff. But they were trying them and they were still having really bad experiences, right? And this is where I sort of stepped out a couple of years ago and said, okay, I don't want to provide the talent anymore. There's loads of options out there for that. I want to go and sit on the firm side and help them address how do we actually make this work for us? Because there's so many different models and options out there. There's so many different countries they can go and find talent that will work, but it's not the same for every firm, right? And the problem is like we need to have a strategy, right? We need to educate our team members who are interacting with our global teams daily as well as to how to do it best. It can't just be like a delegation from the top saying like this is what we're going to do, go and figure out how to do it, right? Because there's lots of resources out there, but nobody was really helping independently to really make sure everything moved in the right direction. So that's sort of where my sort of thought process came in because you can make a lot more money on the BPO side actually building the staff because you get recurring revenue month on month with these firms. And that's where like a lot there aren't really many consultants in this space because they want to provide the talent because it's a bit more secure. Rather than my side, it's again, I normally go into a firm for 6 months, help them out, and then it becomes again, normally they're on a good track then going forward,
Right.
where they just need a little bit of occasional help.
Okay. And then if you could just clarify, a BPO is what?
A business process outsourcer. So, like any type of outsourcing firm that is typically working with, normally in this space, an accounting firm or a CPA firm that's in India or the Philippines,
Right.
typically.
Right. Yeah. And I've worked with many of those, and that it's a good thing, but again, just like everything else is a process, there's a learning curve, and when you can come to the table with at least a template that then we can take that template and apply to a particular
Right.
firm because each firm is going to have some of their own specific nuances, then that's great. So okay, so let's get into the next question. So when you work with small accounting firms specifically, what are the most common challenges that you see right now with these small firms?
So I would say it somewhat intertwines with a bit of everything, but it's capacity planning properly, right? So it's like some firms may have a bit more of a challenge from a retention perspective, whether they're using global teams or even just domestically, right? It's really understanding when is the right time to hire, right? And then making sure that they're actually putting a proper career path together so that the individuals stay with them long term as well, right? So that's definitely one of those like we hear about in the news all the time about like the staffing problems in the space, but I personally don't see it as big of a problem right now, right? I see a lot of firms having a bit of a better experience. There's a bit of technology there as well, but we need to make sure that we are really making sure that we retain as much of that talent as we can and build the best teams we can to in order to scale.
So do you also look at things like the culture and other things of the firm to try and help? Because sometimes it's the owner or the managers and that they're not on the same page with the culture, and sometimes they lose some of their best people because of that type of atmosphere. So you look at those kinds of things as well.
Correct. And I tailor it all. Generally, I get brought in to tailor it towards the global team side of things,
Right.
right? But we have to look at all these elements, including like technology. What softwares do we have the right trainings around the softwares? Do we have the right processes and standardization and controls around those processes? So a lot of like our businesses are built on people, right? In a lot of cases. So it's I have to go in and look at it from a general perspective, what they have in place in the firm. And this is where, even though we're tailoring it towards global teams in a lot of cases, it ends up being they're refining their overall general processes, culture, so that it aligns better with what their future goals are as a firm.
Okay, so then taking that now a step further, what's the biggest misconception that most small firms have in understanding what you guys actually do and provide in terms of the services?
So it's as soon as they hear the word outsourcing, offshoring, I think everyone's burnt out by the phrase, right? They've get so many contacted by every vendor under the sun. So it's like, guys, I don't care who you use. I want to make sure you're using a good provider that's got the right infrastructure in place, the right model that aligns with your vision. But at the end of it, I'm not selling you talent. It doesn't affect me as to like how quickly you grow, but I want to make sure the expectations are there for the firm and also the outsourcing firm, so that when you are having strategic conversations with whoever your provider is, they don't keep coming back to you and saying, "Oh, do you need a new person? Do you need another person?" And it becomes that, rather than fixing some of the quality issues or efficiencies that we could focus on those calls, right? So it becomes a lot more of a better conversation
Right.
overall.
So, can you give me an example of something that you would do? Because I'm the whole point of the outsourcing, but give me an example of something that you would do in terms of that outsourcing, whether it's working, it's usually predominantly India, the Philippines that most Americans will work with. And
Yep.
India is a big area where I've gotten contacted a lot. I get LinkedIn messages from these companies
Yeah.
all the time, and I've met a few of the US based people, or at least their US arm. So what
Mhm.
kind of things do you go through, like a couple of the questions, and then you match them up with, like, for example, I know sometimes it's the bookkeeping help, sometimes it's the tax prep input. Do you have higher level managers in each of those types of things, and kind of how do you make that fit work together for a firm?
So we start off with an assessment to understand the firm, right? What is the overall goal, right? Let's just use tax as an example, right? If they're really utilizing an outsourcing firm more so for just seasonal support, then we need to focus on more of a project-based model, right? And we need to be refine our SOPs, our standard operating procedures, our controls, and our communication, right? It's imperative that we focus on communication during that time and good process, so that we have a good result during the season, because you're not guaranteed to use the same person from year to year, right? You've got a 9 month gap where that turnover may happen with the outsourcing firm, and now you don't want to have to go through a detailed review of training and everything like that again. So we look at more of that standardization then, to ensure that, like, and maybe they've gone on more of an FTE model, but then that tax preparer, FTE meaning full-time
Equivalent,
employee,
right.
whereas then for the external part, that over 9 months of the year, their managers are actually, internal managers are getting frustrated because they don't have the work for them, right? And they're not cross-training and things like that. So we have to do that assessment as to what the real need is first, and then we put the model together and find the right provider if needed. If they've already got a provider, we make sure that they're a good fit for that, right? But we put the right controls in place so that it aligns with whatever that goal is of theirs.
Okay. Sounds good. Then what's one solution that people are usually surprised to learn about that you get the biggest reaction from with what you guys provide?
So I think it's not necessarily a solution. I think it's the impact and the result that they get after the fact, right? So I generally go into a firm for 3 to 6 months, right, and get them moving through the whole process. They've generally done this before. I'm working with a small firm right now in New Jersey. They did 200 returns last year with a provider. right? They had communication problems. They had to stop at 200 and they were frustrated. They've already hit 200 as of last week with a new provider that after working with me for just 2 months, right? And it was that they've retargeted up to 500 returns this season because of it, right? And it's just simply because we addressed what the major concerns were. We refined their process better, documented it. We put some training material together. And because of that, and we have standing meetings a couple of times a week with the provider. And again, it was the right fit for them, right? They have great communication now. It's less of a specific thing. It's more of the overall experience that they typically have. I've I don't think I've worked with a firm yet that has not refined their goal because they've actually achieved what they needed to in the right amount of time.
So in this example of this firm, I think you said in New Jersey, they with the same provider the whole time that you just helped them improve the process and the communication with their company?
For the first couple of years, like for this year, we had to go with a new provider,
Right.
right? The provider, when we did an assessment, really was focused on a different industry. They did not have the skill sets needed for the types of tax returns that we're going across. What we did initially was do a test to figure out, we did a test sample of returns to get a good understanding as to can this provider do this? And it was just that they didn't have the right skill sets internally. Their focus was more in the insurance industry, actually. And they had started to hire. And this is the problem. A lot of people hear the news in the CPA world, we need talent. So a lot of providers have started to step in and say, like, I can hire people, but they don't know how a CPA firm runs.
Right.
So it causes problems.
Okay. And that's where, again, you guys provide that expertise to help people. Because, like, I've met many a firm, I did have a relationship a number of years ago with a firm. I was meeting with the sales guy here who's US based, and they were in India, that they provided accounting and tax people. Never really went anywhere for me personally, but it's nice because I'm sure you've got a lot of experience with working with many of the different firms, so you kind of know with some of those, and I'm sure you learn new ones as you deal with the firms, as finding out who they're using and whether they're the right fit or not. So,
Correct.
right.
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
Super.
It's just so many varieties.
Okay. So next question here. So what's one resource, tip, or best practice you wish every small firm knew?
So one resource tip, best practice. It's having a focus, like especially in today's side of things from the AI and technology aspect, right? We've got so many things that are trying to drag us in different directions. And I see so many firms that will say, okay, we have an issue here. Let's go and fix it by plugging in this new piece of software and test. It's good to test, right? But it's also good to stay aligned with what we're doing, right? Come up with a tech stack that works for you, right? Make sure that your team is properly and appropriately trained and using the majority of that software, not just a small area, right? I see too many people jumping and from one technology, one process to another because they hear something at a conference, right? Rather than staying more aligned with just what we're doing. I think it causes unnecessary stress, pain. It's good to test, but we want to do sort of sample testing and make sure that like our current providers can't help us with those types of things, right? I see, bringing it to the global side of it, I see firms as they develop and they'll start working with the Philippines and India when they only have like one or two resources in each place right now, when they could have really fixed what they needed in one area with one provider and made life a lot simpler, right? So those types of aspects, I would say like focus on what you need, right? Make sure you really get the training around it to have a good process internally. A, you'll be less stressed. B, your team is going to be less stressed as well because they're going to have less change going on.
It's amazing how we love simplicity, but we always end up complicating our lives. I see
Yeah.
it for tax professionals. We see it all the time with our clients. Each year we add new complexities. So along that same lines, in terms of the technology and the tech stack, that I'm assuming is another aspect of your analysis and advisory stuff that you do in the terms of the process of whatever service you're providing to CPAs.
Right. Yeah, we look at the technology, we make sure that it aligns properly. We've got the right user access as well in some cases, because typically otherwise they'll find out mid-season they need certain access, they haven't done the right testing, or they give too limited access where the really an employee won't be able to do the job, and that hasn't been figured out as well, right? We look at all the technology pieces as well.
Okay. So let's then move to the next question. What mistakes do you see that even experienced practitioners make that's costing them time or money? You've already alluded to some of the tech side and the shiny object syndrome sometimes that we have. Is there anything else that you see that's costing them money or time?
Think lack of process and training, right? And what I mean by that is more so that when there is a team member in the office, I think we tend to train them by, like, again, oversight. They'll come to our desk, we'll have an open door policy, we'll do that type of training, but we don't standardize that training, right? Which means that now the next person that you hire is also going to come into your office and you're going to spend that time. What frustrates people is when we go into that remote world, not just necessarily global. I have worked with a team in California. They have remote team members out of state that are nowhere near as efficient as they in office team. And the big problem is because now we associate a meeting on our calendar with time, and we actually see that time in comparison to somebody in our office just being like asking a quick question.
Right.
It becomes a meeting, right? So we're actually wasting a lot of time because of that, when we can create a lot of this training, a lot of this, hey, let me show you how to do this. If you record yourself doing that while doing the process, you've now got an FAQ, you've got training materials, you've got all these aspects that you can really leverage, right? So helps greatly in the people side of things.
Right. Yeah, and that's where I that's usually what I coach a lot of the people I work with and tell them the same thing. Record yourself, go use a free service like a Loom.
Yep.
You can go record things, then get the transcripts, put that in AI, get a written process, save the video. You can do a number of different things because I always say that you go hire that admin person or first year tax person that, I've had all kinds of things happen where they last 2 weeks and then they walk away and now you're starting all over with the training, or they last 6 or a year, and that's a lot of time that you can invest in somebody. Or a simple process like, in terms of the training, and I'm sure this is probably something you advise, but something like you talked about having the open door policy. Well, sometimes it's having the open door policy that you get what you train them to do. And I always loved having the open door policy, but my policy was that, hey, if you've got a question, don't just come to me with a question, come with me with an answer or two. At least put some
Yep.
thought into it, do some research, and because then I want to help you with your thought process and help you understand things better. I think they learn better from that. And then not only that, but they may give me the right answer and then you say, "Hey, good, you're good." We don't have to really have a at length discussion and I don't have to do a whole lot of teaching and training in regard to that. So yeah, we do waste a lot of time dealing with that. Thank you for that.
Yeah, and I would say
Go ahead.
just to add briefly, and not to limit that as
Right.
well, right? So, right, it doesn't have to be from the entry level. I think we all start with going to create an
Right.
entry level material. It's like, as a partner, as a more experienced person, try and try and really understand like how much of your process can be documented so that you can start building training around that. At the end of the day, it's going to save the most senior people in our firms a lot of time.
Super. Yes, I totally agree with that. Okay, so without naming names, can you walk us through a firm that came to you with a challenge, what things look like, and what was their transformation in a 3, 6 month, year time frame? Generally, I would assume that people who do it listen to you, like many clients don't do, but when they listen to you, do the follow the process. That in that time frame, what is it? What is that? What do they look like at the beginning? What is their transformation, and generally about how long does that take, depending on whatever facts and circumstances?
Yeah, so there's a firm in California I'm working with now. Like, they're in their first season, really working with an outsourcing firm. Last year, they tried it. And what they did is they really just dumped a lot of the tax work and audit work on them and had a very terrible experience, right? They created a new process. They said, like, we only just want you doing these pieces of this type of audit, which is completely different than they would give even their team members internally, right? Because of that, they didn't realize that, okay, well, we have to now change what we're reviewing for. We have to identify that. And they just had a really bad experience, right? And we spent, again, it was probably about 3 months prior to getting started in January, preparing them, getting documentation together. And again, getting off calls. We have bi-weekly check-in calls now, both from the audit and tax side. The tax side is going awesome. The audit side, they're starting to see some improvement from like an efficiency perspective. I think that was the only concern now. Quality is there, but it's efficiency, right? And normally there's like a little bit of a gap, which people don't plan for. To like, if somebody domestically is doing it in an hour, it may take an hour and a half offshore initially, right?
Right.
Or 2 hours, right? And we've got to, and it's not about fixing it immediately, but it's about focusing on, do we want to focus on quality or turnaround, right? And essentially balancing plates to make sure that we are improving over the next few months, right? So, and they're super happy with it. And they were shockingly, and also they got their 7216 signed by way more clients than they thought they would. I think they said 85% sign rate.
Wow.
And they were like very hesitant to send it out. they were just concerned about what questions would come back. And they said, honestly, like the clients that came back, we said, don't worry about it. It's a test. We'll look into it next year with you, right? And we'll let you know how the test went. But they got an 85% sign rate for the first time rolling out this type of engagement letter. So it's just about doing, right? You'll be pleasantly surprised as long as you do it in the right way in a lot of cases.
Right. Yeah, and that's usually the holdback for most firms is because of 7216, and I have to make that disclosure to my clients. And we just look at what our society thinks, that sometimes we are a little bit of, in the public, in the news, we are anti-foreign people. It's all about keeping it here in America, which I'm all for. But what I want to follow up with there, you used the term they're finding efficiencies. Are they finding efficiencies in time, in dollars? What are we finding efficiencies? And if you can give me a rough idea on like what, if you can quantify what that efficiency is.
So I would say, and this is where like I spoke at the AICPA G400 last year.
Okay.
There was 3 firms on a panel with me. All of them said we can't quantify the profitability yet with our outsourcing. I don't work with any of these firms, just to be clear. But those 3 firms, mid-sized firms, said that. That makes no sense to me from an outsourcing perspective. It doesn't matter whether you're using South Africa, India, South America, the Philippines. It is less cost. You should be finding a better profitability than using your own domestic staff.
Right.
If you're not, you're doing something wrong, right? However, that shouldn't be the focus for a lot, right? So they were getting they are definitely getting a cost savings, right? I would say by about 40%. Obviously, last year they had a bunch of rework. It didn't make sense. That's
Right.
where the problem's going to come in, right? But they are, from the 1.5 times, they're closer to about 1.2 times the amount of time being spent offshore compared to their domestic staff, which on average, you're going to find 1.5 times. At the beginning, we were finding 1.8 to 2 times as long offshore, but within a month, that's dropped considerably.
Yeah, that totally makes sense then. Okay, so Lawrence, what's the best way for someone listening here to reach you, and what can they expect from you and your team when they reach out to you? What kind of, do you have anything to offer for the audience?
So you can go to whitmanadvisory.com, right? And I'm sure there's that there. In the small firm suite, right, I have a masterclass there as well that you can go in, you can learn about all these different strategies around global strategies, right? You can learn about what the options are and everything. I also have an assessment, a free assessment for small firms. You can go in and do it and get results back, and it'll tell you what areas to focus on, whether it's process, technology. I've built out a lot of tools that you have ready access to. And also with the AICPA, I built out the best practice toolkit for outsourcing. So there's in their practice management group, you can go on, if you're a member of the AICPA, you can download it's about a 70-page toolkit right? And I'm more than happy to send that to anybody as well, but it's readily accessible. Go learn about it, right? But getting in contact with us, my first step is let's have a conversation. I want to understand your goals, what problems you're having, where do you want to get with this, and let's align for the vision of the firm first. And we'll figure out what the best track is forward, right? I like to have conversations. I'm not a seller from that sense. I prefer the education side of things. Let me educate you first. If I can give you some tips, I'll give you some tips on the call, right? There's a time and a place to bring me in or anybody on our team. But I like to have the conversation so that you know when is the right time.
Super. And we'll have below in the show notes the links to get to your website and any other additional information there. So I want to follow up and make something clear here, because obviously the definition of small firm, obviously everybody kind of has a different definition. It's no different than small business can be up to usually $50 million. So when we talk small firm, because a lot of our audience are sometimes are the sole practitioners, they have staff less than 5 people. Is that still a good fit? Should they still be reaching out to you, doing your assessments in terms of whether they work with you or not?
Yeah. So honestly, like even if you, as long as you have a practice, right, from I would say like around that 150K mark, right, you can at least, I would probably more likely direct you more towards some of my free tools, right, and say, but I've had feedback from firms that have gone in, like, and again, around that 400K mark, that have gone in and done my assessment for global strategy and said, I've taken this and I've got 7 points that I'm going to be working on my processes, on my training, and these types of aspects. They're not even thinking about the outsourcing element right now, right? But there are things in quite early stages you can really get leverage by using global support, even if it's like a VA. I recommend like exclude the tax, exclude the audit and the accounting, get a VA,
Right.
right? That's going to save you so much time just from a management organizing perspective. So there's lots of features that can be done. So, but I would have a conversation happily with anybody to direct them in the right place. I've seen firms of all sizes.
Right. I would say I know in some of looking at your site and some of the services you guys offer at a minimum sometimes succession planning. We don't think about that, especially when you're young, starting your own firm. But as I say, God can take you home anytime, and you really need to look at that, because succession planning um, is something that needs to be done, and it's no different than estate planning. I mean, we don't want to deal with death, but at the
Yeah.
same time, you're doing it because for your family, because you love them, because they're the ones that are left picking up the pieces. And I've dealt with many a widow who just didn't know they weren't involved in the practice, they didn't know what was going on. So succession planning, you mentioned CFO services for CPAs. So there are a lot of different things that you guys have to offer, and I would definitely highly encourage people to go out and look at your assessment tool to see what opportunities, or have a conversation with you to see, because sometimes it's a simple working with processes, mapping out an opportunity for working with you for outsourcing or just hiring talent in general, because I'm sure you also deal with not just the
Yes.
offshore stuff, you can help with hiring US based people as well, right?
Right, right. So we have recruiters that help with that talent side of things as well, right? I personally, it would be a conversation. We'd figure out what areas that a firm needs or is interested in exploring. And then I would introduce experts within our team that focus on that,
Right.
right? So that's the big thing. It could be a lot of different areas surrounding practice management in the majority of cases we help with.
Well, great. So thank you so much. So I'm going to have one other good question here for you. So this is the kind of question I like to wrap up things. So what's a book, podcast, or resource that's had a real impact on how you think about the work that you do?
So from that side, I will say that it's less of the books and the podcasting and its relationships. I have had the pleasure over the past 10 years of working with a lot of managing partners of mid-size and larger firms
Right.
that I've been able to like use as a resource and go to. So, and actually learn the insides and outs of the firms. So it's honestly more from those relationships that I've learned and really tracked my career on, to be honest, because it's real life experience, right? It's things that they're doing. They're not necessarily publishing in books and things like that. But I've had now the pleasure of working with probably 500 plus CPA firms. So I enjoy learning the stories and what's going on. There are lots of resources out there, though, that are being published on the global side of things, not just by myself, by a lot of the providers. I recommend reading it, right? There's a lot of resources in your societies. Go look at those resources that are there, right? Because it's better to educate yourself on it, right, in a more general fashion rather than just like, I see a lot of firms just trying vendors, right, just to try them. And it's like, learn from others that have already done that way to figure out what the best option is, and you'll save a lot of time that way.
Yeah. So ultimately, you're then advocating, especially with small practitioners, networking with even the mid-sized, larger firms, people who have probably been where they are at this point in time, and may be able to help, even to be sort of a mentor slash coach for them as well.
100%. And you'll be surprised how many of even those firms, they're changing drastically very quickly in this environment. Like it's everybody,
Right.
right? So you'll see, like, but they'll be able to help guide you as to like the best ways to adapt as quickly as
Right.
possible, right?
Right.
So similar challenges all the way up at different scales, to be very
Right.
honest.
So yeah, that's great, valid advice. I mean, that's something I usually recommend to, especially for somebody who's been there. I mentioned to you before we got started that I sold my practice a little over 2 years ago, and anybody who wants to talk to me about, and I used a broker here in the U.S. and between the broker, the experience of the documents, and then everything afterward, I have at least a list of what not to do. Anybody will be more than welcome to ask me about that. I may even have a monologue episode where I might talk about that as well. Laurence, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate this. And a lot of the links of everything that Laurence, to be able to reach out to him to find out more about Whitman Advisory, will be below in the show notes. Please check that out. Please don't forget to follow, like, or subscribe, depending on where you're hearing this podcast from, and be sure to tell your friends. Thank you guys for being here for the Practitioner's Edge, the small firm suite of the FICPA podcast. You guys have a great rest of your day.